looking at perfection, the target no one will hit. Don't be discouraged. We're going to redefine it. Excuse me. This talk probably has more to do with me than it does with you. How many of you are striving for perfection? Just one, yeah, good. That's job security for me. So, what I have begun to realize over the last several years is there's two levels of perfection that have been put out in front of me in my life. And the first came through my traditional Christian upbringing, and the only perfect person in the world was Jesus. He was sin-free, and he also died for my sins, so I owed him big time. And that was people would always say, well, what would Jesus do in a case like this? What would Jesus say? Like, we're all supposed to do that, and probably would not hurt anything if we were more like that. But was kind of a standard of perfection, was to be like Jesus. And I think in Bible school we sang about that. Someday we could be like Jesus. I can't remember the words, because I knew I'd never make it, so I just quit singing that one. So then I get into unity, and there's another image of Jesus that's put forward, and that was by Charles Fillmore, and I'll specifically talk about that in just a moment. But it's the idea, the general idea is that his soul reached a level of absolute perfection. And that perfection manifested through his physical body, which allowed him to resurrect from the dead and live eternally. So that was the goal that was presented to me as a ministerial student. That's what we are to teach, that all healing just means you're bringing out that which is the perfection of spirit, and that's true. The question is, are we to be in this vehicle forever? Is this our goal, to be immortal physical beings? And if we are aging and getting a little more tired than usual, does that mean we're failing? Does that mean our soul is not reaching the point it ought to reach, to be like Jesus, from that perspective? And Jesus is presented as our way shower. We've all heard this. I've taught it for many years. And the way shower to what? And that is perfect soul evolution, the place where the soul reaches maximum capacity. So the body reflects where the soul is right now, according to Charles Fillmore. And if your body is not expressing that wholeness, then that means your soul has not yet reached that level of perfection. So you probably have another lifetime or two ahead of you, is what it really comes down to. Charles Fillmore called the reincarnation the Father's loving provision, that we get to come back and try it again. And frankly, I don't want to. And I know I'm not going to reach that perfection this time around. So I'm going to have a conversation with somebody. I don't know who yet, but I'm not going to do this again for a while. Maybe I'll come back at some point, but when I hear all these near-death people, I don't want to come back. It sounds like they're having way too much fun. So many of us were taught to see Jesus as the perfect man demonstrated. This is a quote of Charles Fillmore's. The flawless figure against whom our own lives are inevitably measured. While this image may inspire, it can also create a burden. Some of you knew Helen Hansen, and how she was very adamant about not talking about her age, because if you talk about her age, she'll become that. And that's we don't want to have that kind of conversation. Well, I watched her age and I watched her die. I watched her transition onto the other side. And I never once thought there was anything wrong with her. But I was seeing her in the hospital one day, and a nurse came in and read one of her oxygen level numbers or something, which happened to be her age. And Helen got very angry at this poor nurse for telling everybody her age, which actually the resistance to that told everybody her age. So she said, "I told you not to tell my age." But she took that very serious, and it weighed very heavy on her. And so I've seen many people in Unity do that. She's kind of the exception here. I haven't met too many people here in Grand Junction that carry that burden. In fact, her friend, Janet Payton, same age, she was happy about telling how old she was and when her birthday was. And that used to really bother Helen. But because we all knew they were the same age. But I've known several people that have locked into that and that belief that, I'm just not making it. I'm getting older, I'm showing wrinkles, I'm showing signs of age and all that, so I'm just not going to make it this time. So thank God there's reincarnation. I'll come back and try it again. So I bought into that for many, many years because it made sense. It seemed like, well, that does make sense because the soul, the body is an outpicturing of our thinking and all that. It reflects. You can worry yourself sick. Have you ever done that? We can make the body respond to our thoughts in that way. But the thing I noticed is all of my colleagues, my ministerial colleagues that taught this same formula, the same idea, same paradigm, I was noticing they were getting older. And then I started noticing they were starting to die. I'm one of the few left in my class. One of my other friends, Blair Tabor, called the other day, and we had a nice chat, and we discussed how we're kind of the lone survivors, this whole thing. But does that mean that all of us that have embraced this and not made it, that we failed? So I used to think that was a sign of failure, and that we should be able to transcend that. And I think back on that now, and I think that's absolutely insane, to think that way, because it puts a very unnecessary burden on us. And if you have not carried that burden, good. I'm glad you haven't. But it's the same thing if I'm not living up to the Jesus Christ standard. I'm not doing what Jesus would do. Jesus wouldn't say those nasty things to that person that ran over your cat. Jesus would go out and hug them and, forgive them and all of that. I don't think he would. I think he'd go over to their house and turn their tables over. I think he would have a very human reaction, just like all of us. I think that's all projection from the Bible writers, not from who Jesus was himself. We don't know who he was. We don't know if he had a good sense of humor. We don't know really anything about him personally. And here we are trying to live up to whoever he was. And what we have is this projection. And what we have from Charles Fillmore is a projection. Fillmore didn't know him. He's taking a thought and working it out as a theory. Here's how it ought to look. The soul is complete. It does have an influence on how the body shows up. So it must be that if the body is not showing up in its full capacity, there's some hang up there. The soul is not evolved enough yet. So we go back and we work on trying to fix everything. Perfection becomes the target no one will ever hit, leaving us discouraged when we discover our flaws and limitations. And that's just another thing. If you don't behave like you think you ought to be, where does that standard come from? If it's not coming from you, if you're not answering that question by just saying, I don't want to behave that way because I don't like how I feel when I do it. instead of, well, Jesus wouldn't have done that, so I must be failing. We don't want to put a standard outside of ourselves. I don't want to react that way because of how I feel when I'm doing it. And that should be good enough. It should be good. That should be our guide. And if we think we can overcome it, all the better. But what if we don't? I don't know anybody, I've never met anybody that I know of anyway, I should say, that has overcome all human frailty. However we want to measure that. And what the near-death people teach us is that doesn't even matter. Nobody's going to overcome it. It doesn't matter. That's not the target. That's not the right target. There is no target on this planet that we want to aim for and hit, and if we miss it, we're going to lose. That's what we're taught. If you don't get it right, you'll go to hell, or if you don't get it right, you're going to come back and have to go through this crap again. We don't want to do that. Sorry. I get a little emotional sometimes about it. But you know what I mean, right? It's like how much easier it would be if you didn't have the body to drag around, to feed, to shelter, and to get in the car and all the stuff we have to do. But I'm not complaining about that. Neither am I saying that's my mark of success. Wherever my body is, that's my mark of success. I can't walk on water, so does that make me a bad person? It's like if the perfect man out there could do it and I can't, that means I've got to come back and work on it until I can walk on that water. Well, I can walk on it, but it's got to be wintertime. So here's kind of where this comes from. The statement of faith, Unity Statement of Faith, which Charles Fillmore wrote. There were many articles of it, but he says, we believe that through conscious union with Jesus in the regeneration, man can transform his body and make it permanently healthy, therefore immortal, and that he can attain eternal life in this way and in no other way. So that's what I was trained with. That's how I was trained to think. That's how I was trained to go out and talk to people like you, that you should be able to attain immortality in your body. Well, does Charles Fillmore's picture does that look like an immortal man to you? It looks like a man about 80 and doing the aging thing just like me. He's got 10 years on me there probably. But he actually blamed photographers for taking his picture and showing this old man. When he says inside my own head, I'm a young man, I'm 27, I'm whatever. And that other people would describe him as an older gentleman and so forth. So it was like, stop saying that about me. And it's sort of like the joke with Helen Hansen, don't say my age because I'll become that. So your age is everybody else's fault. It becomes that. Well, as I look back on that, that seems so ludicrous to me that there is nothing, like you have a pet, like a dog, for example, and if you have that dog through its full life, you'll see it as a puppy, you'll see it grow, you'll see it grow older. And like the last dog we had, you take it to the vet one day and put it down because it's inhumane to keep it going. So did that dog sin, not live up to the perfect dog ideal? Is that dog's soul not whole? And you think of all of creation as that way. Everything has a birth, a middle, and an end. That's not a bad thing. This planet we're on had a beginning, and everybody says it's going to have an end. The fundamentalists say it's coming pretty quick, but it'll come when it comes. It may come tomorrow. We may be bullseyed by an asteroid, or who knows. Or we may do it to ourselves, but I don't think we will. I think God will do it for us. It's a natural process. The planet will someday die, and we'll find another one. We'll do something. The soul will not die. So we don't judge where we are at the spiritual level by what's going on outside. That is important, though. We want to tie the mind with the outside experience that we're having, because we understand the more optimistic, the more positive, the more enthusiasm we have for life, the better life shows up. The better it makes this life, the better things become. So there is a definite connection between how we think, how we feel, and how our life shows up. But when we think of the bigger picture, every one of us, I am sure, is going to reach the point where we step off this planet, step out of these bodies. We give them up, not as failures. We will look back on this lifespan and we will think it was a flash in the pan, and we're just fine. You know, again, the near-deathers say they're happier without the body than they are with it. They don't want to go back because they're crammed into this very tight space and they don't want to go back there. So what is this idea of perfection? The concept of perfection can be thought of in two ways. Perfection as a state to be reached. That's the perfect man ideal, the perfect person ideal. Get that soul beefed up, regenerated to the point where it expresses as a perfect body that is immortal, that does not die. That's a state to be reached. Or perfection is a process allowing further growth and adaptation. That's what perfection is to me. I said it in my first book that I wrote, Practical Guide to Meditation and Prayer. Talked about, when is a tomato perfect? You know, it's perfect at every stage. It's like perfect as a seed, it's perfect as a green plant, it's perfect as a green tomato, it's perfect as a red tomato, it's perfect at all states. Perfection is the ability to cycle, to move, to process, to evolve. So I put this series of horses, you know, they start out as this little thing, you know, as a couple of feet tall, maybe less than that, and then it goes through this evolution process. But every one of those phases has died, and then something else takes over. It just keeps going because it's able to adapt. But there's no living ancient horse. You know, they've all gone. We have living current horses. That's all we're really interested in. So it's not something, you know, I mean, again, we go back, is the horse's soul imperfect? So imperfect that it can't attain an immortal horse body. What's the difference in humans and animals? What's the difference in humans and galaxies? Astronomers look out and they tell us, you know, galaxies, they see them at every stage. There are nurseries that are giving birth to new galaxies. There are galaxies that are very old. Stars, you know, that young and old, that they measure things in that regard, but things with beginnings and ends. And so to label that as wrong or negative is a burden on us, because we're in that process where we are in a physical body that is mortal. But we are not mortal. We are immortal. And that we don't live in a body that is immortal says nothing of the soul. It's like you're 16 years old. I remember being 16 and getting my first car, Carmen Ghia, 63 red Carmen Ghia, Volkswagen, $375, all the money I had. And I thought, I don't ever want another car. I was so happy. It's like my dad was taking me around trying to find the right car, and I'd say, how do you know? You know, he says, you'll know it. And so after looking at many cars, we drive into this parking lot. There's this red Carmen Ghia, and heavens opened up. The Lord appeared and said, that's it. Besides, you can't afford any more than that, so take it. So I took it, and I put 3 engines in it because they kept blowing up. It did not have an immortal soul. So I moved on to a 1972 Econoline van, which was, that was the last one. That was all I needed. Anyway, you get the point. The vehicle is not the object. It's the thing we ride in for a time. And so this physical body is that thing. It's that vehicle. And we want to love and take care of it just, as well as we can while we're in it. Just like the first engine I blew in my Volkswagen was because I was out of oil. And the oil light was green in that car. I thought oil lights were supposed to be red, so I didn't check the oil. I watched that green light. And I was driving through a tourist town on the main strip of this tourist town in South Missouri in front of a whole bunch of tourists. And the car locked up. It just stopped. It was like I slammed on the brakes and the motor quit running. So it was a nice show for everybody there to observe. But that's how it died. And yet it was reborn when I found another motor. Oh, that's a whole thing. But that's not the point. I've had many cars since then, and I'm not ready to stop on any one of them. It'd be kind of nice if you could buy a car and it would last, your whole lifetime. But the trouble is, we don't like them that long. We want to change. We just have enough of that car, so we want to move on. But anyway, what the perfection we're looking at is, am I open and receptive? See, what I feel like I'm doing is getting a good sense of myself as a soul. This thing will go someday, but I have no fear that I myself will still hang around, will still be here. And I'll buy another Carnegie or whatever it takes, and maybe if I don't want to do this again, I won't. I do think we're here by choice, and I think that's a very important part of the thing. But with the Fillmorian belief system, reincarnation is not a choice. It's a required link in the chain. If you don't succeed bringing the body up, by bringing the soul up to full firing on all cylinders, you come back. Not because you want to, but because you have to. It's like flunking a grade. You got to go back and take it again. And again, I used to embrace that idea totally, and have come to not embrace it anymore. The physical body will never reach a final state of immortality. The spiritual body will never be anything less than complete. The soul and body is a combination of quantum and Newtonian physics. That's what we are. The soul operates according to the principles of quantum mechanics. The body is subject to Newtonian physics. If you want to go someplace, you got to walk or drive or whatever. The soul, on the other hand, if you're free of this vehicle, just think about a place and you're there. So that's quantum. That's totally different. And I'm not a quantum physicist. I'm just saying we've discovered two kinds of physics. We are that. There's a part of us that is immortal now, and there's a part of us that is mortal. So, they say the body, any part of it, what's the oldest part of the body at any given time, like 7 years or something like that? There's the regeneration thing, which that's why the whole idea of regeneration was tapped into, because it does happen. It is going on. The body is regenerating itself all the time. So it's an understandable belief, but to take that and put it on the soul level doesn't work. Because the soul, if we are created in the image and likeness of God, according to Genesis, does that mean God is incomplete? That does not make any sense. We are projections of that. It's like the cup of water out of the ocean. It is the same stuff. So the cup of water is limited to the cup, but it's not incomplete. It is complete as water, as ocean water. It's one and the same thing. So that's the soul. So that whole idea of having to reach some standard, we want to do it because we want to do it. We want to do it to make our lives better if we're having trouble. And there's something we can do to change our thought or change the way we are showing up in life. But that's a whole different motivation than thinking, I'm getting older, so I'm a failure. That is not a good, and maybe it's because I'm getting older that I don't want to believe that anymore. I don't think I ever did believe it. I remember when I was just starting out in ministry, I met another young man. He was very athletic, very much into Fillmore, and he said he would live in this body forever. He had learned to master that, and maybe he has. I haven't seen him since. But I have seen many people, and I've never seen any that I thought were going to live forever in the body. I just think that's the wrong target. You miss that mark, you're okay. Don't worry about it. Paul's own description of the resurrection offers a different perspective. He wrote, "It is sown a physical body, it is raised a spiritual body." His words point away from physical immortality and toward transformation of consciousness. His encounter with the risen Christ was not about seeing a body restored, but about awakening to a reality so profound it altered the course of his life. That's, to me, what is striking is Paul was probably the most influential figure in the whole Christian movement. He's the only first-hand witness to the resurrected Jesus. And you'll say, well, what about all those people in the Gospels that said they saw him and he ate fish with them and all that stuff? Those weren't first-hand accounts. We have gospel accounts, and those Gospels were written at least 40 years after the death of Jesus. There's no first-hand witness in the gospel account anywhere. Paul's letters represent that one first-hand account. And his recollection is a vision. That means the Jesus he saw couldn't eat fish necessarily. It was a vision, but it was no less real. It changed his whole life. He was out persecuting Christians. He had this experience. It changed his whole life. Very profound. So it doesn't, to say that the body thing is, let's set that aside, doesn't mean anything less. Paul saw the reality of Jesus. Many near-death experiencers say the same thing. They encounter Jesus. I don't know if that's true or not. They encounter something that makes a big change. And what I kind of think that is we encounter what we need. However it needs to show up for us to have the most effect. It shows up that way. And because I've heard people, and I think I've said, that they'll say, I saw Jesus and he looked just like that photograph of him that we have, just like that painting. Well, where did that painting come from? Nobody's ever seen that man. If we were transported back to the day of Jesus, we saw 10 Jewish men lined up. Do you think you could point him out of that lineup? We don't know what he looked like. So when somebody sees him, they have a near-death experience and claim they see the man that looked just like the sandals and the hair and the whatever else, the robe and all that stuff. They're definitely pulling out of their subconscious imagery, but they're putting into that or melding that with something very profound. Because I don't care if I meet Jesus, frankly. I feel like I'm meeting him now as I'm writing this book. It's been a very therapeutic relationship development with Jesus. But I don't need a Jesus that lives in a physical body forever. I don't need a Charles Fillmore that lives in a physical body forever. I don't need anybody to live in a physical body forever, because that would make me feel like a loser. That would make me feel like I have not done what I should be doing spiritually. I don't think anybody was shooting for that target. I don't think Jesus was. I don't think Charles Fillmore definitely was. He wrote in Unity magazine one time that he would be the first to attain immortality in the body. And he got more pushback on that article, I think, than anything else he ever wrote. It angered a lot of people. But that's neither here nor there. I'm just confessing that I embraced that idea for many years, that was the possibility, that was the target we're aiming for, that the soul was evolving, it was not yet complete, and we have a ways to go. If you don't believe me, just look at your body, and that's, but the body has nothing to do with that. The soul is fine. So the point of this is, if you have any sense of you are imperfect, you have problems because of where your body is, if maybe you're, things just aren't working like they used to, that you're some kind of a failure, or you can't live up to the Jesus Christ standard, the metaphysical one or the traditional one, either one. I would give anything to be able to talk to Jesus directly. I don't want to have a near-death experience to do that, but I think he would say, I didn't do any of that. That's not what I taught. That's not what physical immortality. You notice he doesn't spend a lot of time talking about life after death. His focus is here, now. How to live in this body right now, the very best you can. And when the time comes, you'll age. He said the time will come, you'll have to be carried around. So he acknowledged that, but I don't think he taught it. Modern near-death experiences testify to something similar. Their reports rarely focus on physical details. Instead, they describe a profound peace and overwhelming sense of love, and encounters with familiar and unfamiliar figures who radiate welcome. They return to this life deeply changed, often free from the fear of death. The miracle is not that they avoided dying, but their perspective shifted. And I think that's what has gradually happened to me, is I've shifted from trying to stay alive forever to knowing that I am alive forever. That which I am is alive forever. I'm not always going to be driving this Carmen Ghia. And that's fine. This motor's going to blow one of these days. And I don't know when that is. I hope it's not, too near future. When Jesus is seen as mystic rather than unreachable icon, we are released from the crushing demand to be flawless. Our aging bodies, our frailties, our scars do not disqualify us from spiritual success. They remind us that what is most real is not the body at all, but the enduring self beneath it. The mystic teaches that we are more than flesh. We are spirit expressing through flesh. And that's the saying that keeps going around. We don't know who originated, but the idea that you're a spiritual being going through a human experience, that's I really like that, as many people do, resonate with that idea. And that is true no matter where I am on the scale, a young kid or an old man. My soul is never aged. It's the whole water thing I was telling you. You take a cup of water out of the ocean one day, and then 10 years later you take another cup out. Which cup of water is older? They're exactly the same age. And that's the soul. And so we think of that. We know the birth date of the cup of water, but that has nothing to do with the age of the water. Water's the same age. I love that perspective. So if perfection as a state to be reached is the measure, we will always miss the mark. But the spiritual path suggests another way. Not to hit the target, but to remain open to the unfolding process. In this shift in perception, the search for perfection gives way to peace. And one thing that's occurred to me is one reason we might want to come back here is maybe we checked out early last time around, and we want to see what it's like to do the whole thing, from birth to old age. it's just a temporary experiment, so why not? Maybe we lost our life, physical life, in a prior time earlier than we wanted. We just want to see what it's like to do the whole thing. I don't know. But I don't mind that thought. Thank you for watching this week's program. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with others. We want to reach as many people as we can, and we appreciate your help. We have many subjects in our video lineup, so feel free to take a look. If there's a topic you don't see and would like me to address, just put it in the comment section. I'd love to know what's on your mind. Thanks again for your interest in Independent Unity, and have a wonderful week.